going on here? You look handsome. Hi, this is Sally Morgan, physical therapist, craniosacral therapist, and Tellington T-Touch practitioner for animals and people. This is Tristan. He's still looking for reindeers out that window, although they haven't been there for 2 weeks. He's a Corgi, and this is an episode of Conversations with a Corgi. And today we're going to continue our talk about service and therapy dogs and some of the definitions involved in that and what that entails. Yesterday we talked about Canine Good Citizen certification, which is where you start to become a therapy dog. And today I want to talk about animal assisted therapy, abbreviated as AAT, animal assisted therapy. This is a specific type of therapy provided by an animal and performed by a registered therapist of some kind. That would be a PT, an OT, maybe a rec therapist, even a nurse or a doctor sometimes. And animal-assisted therapy can be tremendously helpful. It can help decrease a person's pain because, as you recall, smiling and petting a dog increases oxytocin and serotonin in your brain, which is the trust hormone, oxytocin, and the feel-good hormone, serotonin. And so that's going to be really combative against pain feelings for a person. Animal-assisted therapy can improve mobility for a person. Sometimes a person who is not wanting to walk for fear of pain after a knee replacement, maybe 6 weeks in when they're feeling better, will walk a dog around a therapy room, even though they wouldn't get up and walk otherwise. So they can improve mobility. They can speed up post-surgery healing because of the decreased stress in the body, the decreased blood pressure, heart rate, and that can put the body in an optimal position to heal. The other thing that animal-assisted therapy dogs do are kinds of emotional therapy, such as working with autistic children, increasing social interactions for withdrawn children or adults, and also for people who are having psychotherapy sessions. Sometimes a person will feel comfortable talking to a dog or a cat when they wouldn't feel comfortable talking to just a person. And I have seen myself many, many times how people open up when a dog is in the room, and no matter how nice you are, they're not going to open up to you without that dog. So animal-assisted therapy is provided, again, by a licensed therapist, and the dogs they work with are often their own pets, but not always. Not every dog is suited to this kind of work, and it just seems a random coincidence that you have a therapy license of some kind yourself to provide emotional or physical work with a person, and that you also have a dog who's good at doing it. So sometimes people will use a therapy dog that's been certified by a therapy dog association to provide that animal-assisted therapy. And I know myself, several pediatric facilities I'm aware of have a dog come at a certain time each week, particularly to work with clients. And if the client would benefit from working with the dog, they schedule the client during the time that the dog's there. And the dog is part of the therapy session. Now myself, as a physical therapist, I have worked with my dogs in settings where they can be doing animal-assisted therapy. Primarily, I did that with my dogs Winston and Comet. And what we discovered early on when I was doing this in the early 2000s, and it was just becoming a thing then, I had to be super careful how I wrote my physical therapy notes to reflect the use of a dog. It had to still document one of the things that we were billing for, such as therapeutic exercise, and how the dog assisted in that therapeutic exercise needed to be carefully worded. So I would say something like performed this number of reps of overhand throwing to assist with shoulder rehab for this particular muscle, with animal-assisted therapy to improve patients' willingness to do more reps or something like that. It was really complicated. It took a long time to learn, to teach myself really, because nobody else was doing it, how to document it, and that is a big challenge. So somewhere a couple of years in, my boss was getting nervous. Medicare rules were changing in the early 2000s. Reimbursement rates were going down from like $150 for an hour of treatment to like $120 and $190 to where it's like $60 now. So, and he was getting worried that we would be denied Medicare coverage for anything we had documented with the use of a dog. So he said, you know what, don't put the dog in your notes, even if you're using the dog. Just document it as therapeutic exercises or mobility training or whatever you were doing with the person, but don't put the dog in the notes. And this is a thing about animal-assisted therapy. You know, it sounds great. We all would love to enjoy working with animals. We all know of children who can, or seniors who have talked when they're with a dog, but don't necessarily do that when they're with a teacher or a physical therapist or an occupational therapist. There have been so many miracles with dogs and therapists. However, it's all governed by insurance, and insurance is getting so tight and tricky that I think we're going to see a real decline in documented animal-assisted therapy. That doesn't mean that dogs won't still do animal-assisted therapy, but it might mean that you're going to see a lot of it written less often in notes. And after that initial job I had another job at an outpatient facility where we continue to document using animal-assisted therapy, and I'm certified in like a million things, so there wasn't any question about the credibility of this, and my dogs had demonstrated all kinds of wonderful abilities to help people. And then my next job after that, they, like my first boss, said, you can bring the dog, but you can only use them with certain patients, clear them with us first, and you cannot in any way write that in a person's notes that you're using animal-assisted therapy. And so the change has really come about over the last 17 years since I've been doing animal-assisted therapy. Now, things like therapeutic horseback riding, that is technically animal-assisted therapy. The horse is assisting, providing OT, PT, psychological services for a person. And even the documentation for that is tricky. That's why a lot of these places, one reason why, they're continuously fundraising, because they are trying to get the finances to cover people's therapy experiences with the horse. You can't often, even a PT or an OT, you can't often bill for animal-assisted therapy and hippotherapy and equine therapy very successfully. I mean, you can do it, but you might only get by for a certain amount of time and for a certain number of sessions and for a certain number of years. So although lots of therapeutic riding facilities successfully still are able to bill, especially a child's insurance, to cover their animal-assisted therapy of therapeutic riding, for some reason, the insurance doesn't want to cover this. And maybe things will change, but currently the insurance market is in a very tight place, and the documentation for any kind of therapy has gotten very complex and specific. If you don't document things exactly the way they want you to, they just won't cover it. And it can be even so simple as, not having the patient's name with last name first at the top of the page. I've seen claims denied for some things like that when there were other issues that they couldn't really protest, but that was not one of their rules, and if you broke it, you were not going to get paid. So animal-assisted therapy is a great thing. I have done craniosacral therapy with my animals. I've done therapeutic exercise with my animals. Comet did an amazing thing with a mobility client once. We had an older gentleman with a walker. I forget what was going on with him. He had had some strokes, and we were helping him feel safe in the community with his walker. He'd been coming for therapy for 2 or 3 different rounds of therapy following some kind of episode. He was in his 80s. He couldn't drive anymore, and he needed to walk a fairly short distance, way less than 1/8 of a mile, to get to some stores and do some errands to help himself. So we were really, community ambulation was a big goal for us with him. So we took him out, PTA and I, this was in the day when you could have help doing a session, and my dog Winston, and the guy was holding Winston's leash attached to a harness, and we were using Winston to give the guy a little bit of a balance challenge while the PTA was protecting him, and I was sort of supervising the session. So we had Comet, we would say pull, pull little, pull lot, and he would just give a little bit of tension on the walker to help the guy either continue forward or to just challenge his balance a little bit, pulling in different directions. Now, today, I don't know if I would do that. Having worked in nursing facilities since then, having a person fall is so terrible and creates so much paperwork that I don't know that we'd be challenging his balance in the same way. But, there were two of us. Anyway, we were outside. We were going around the sidewalk around our building, which was about as far as he'd ever have to walk. It was smooth. It was a safe place. But we were going to try to cross the street with him to see if he could get through, if he could shuffle along fast enough that he would be safe when the light came with the walk signal. So we had Winston, and Winston was just such a great assisted therapy dog. And he stopped and refused to cross the street. He sat down in front of the guy's legs and he refused to move. And, the PTA and I were like, what's going on? I don't know. And we were having the guy do a wider stance so he'd be safer when he was standing because the curb went down a little bit, because it was cut out for wheelchairs. And at that moment, a car came streaming down the street a bazillion miles an hour, ran through the red light, and there was a huge accident in the middle of the intersection. And me, the dog, the PTA, and the guy would have been in the middle of that. There would have been no way for any of us to move fast enough to get out of the way. And we were so grateful to Winston for stopping us. It was just one of those many, many amazing times when your dog knows more than you do. And of course, he has, dog extrasensory perception, but I'm sure he could hear that car and smell perhaps something in the air, that there was tension from the other drivers that this guy was passing. So we ended up not ever figuring out if that guy could cross the street safely. He didn't have to cross many streets in his neighborhood, and they were pretty quiet. And we suggested that if he needed to cross the street, that he have someone go with him. So it worked out, but dogs can do amazing things. I don't want to discount at all what you can do with animal-assisted therapy. And certainly now in the United States, it's becoming so popular to do kinds of psychological growth and therapy working with horses. And again, I don't know that all of this is billable to insurance. I'm sure some people, OTs that I know, have been doing things like this with some success, but they're still doing an OT session. That's the thing with an animal-assisted therapy session. It's still a session of PT, OT, rec therapy, nursing care, whatever the person is providing. And so it has to be more about that than about the dog. And that's part of the heartbreak for somebody who loves dogs of doing animal-assisted therapy. And you might be better off just having a therapy dog. And most dogs that do animal-assisted therapy are certified as therapy dogs. And when you do work with a therapy dog, the focus is more on the interaction between the client and your dog. But when you're doing animal-assisted therapy, the focus is on the therapy and the person. And the dog is the same thing as an exercise bike or, parallel bars or a balance board, whatever other therapeutic assistive device you might be using with that person. So I love animal-assisted therapy. Certainly I've done lots of work with it over the years and fought with insurance a little bit, although frankly none of my animal-assisted therapy notes have ever been denied, so we've been fortunate that way. The other important thing is when you're doing animal-assisted therapy, and you need to really know the dog that you're working with. And whether it's your dog or someone else's dog that you're working with, you can't keep them working all day often because the animals get tired and fatigued and stressed because they can feel your nervousness when they're around strangers and they're trying to do an assistive task. Sometimes it can be really challenging and tiring for the dog, just like it is for a person working with somebody who can't talk after a stroke or something. It can be really kind of exhausting because your brain is racing, trying to figure out, okay, what can I try next? Well, can I try this with him? Well, he had success with that. What does that mean about this? And then you've got the dog there too. So your dog picks up on all that. So it can be a little stressful for them. And I think we'll have to do an entire episode on how to select a dog to be a therapy dog. Surprisingly, very few qualify. It often is not the dogs that you think are going to be great. A waggly happy dog is not necessarily going to be calm enough to be a therapy dog. So back to animal-assisted therapy, can be super beneficial for people. And I know quite a few people who are in my area. There's a bazillion psychoanalysts and psychotherapists and social workers and people that do emotional work with people. And a lot of them just have their dog laying in the office. It doesn't really interact with the person. They're not really providing animal-assisted therapy, but they are providing therapy with an animal in the room, which is loosely animal-assisted therapy. And sometimes having a cat curled up at the end of the sofa when you're talking to someone about something stressful, even if the cat's not touching you and he's just purring, you are still feeling, release of hormones in your brain that are helpful to you, like the trust hormone, oxytocin, just with the presence of an animal. And that can help you really process some information with the guidance of a therapist. So animal-assisted therapy is still being done everywhere, certainly with therapeutic riding and, versions of this with the emotional work that lots of horses are helping with people. So it's important that you are well aware of your dog, though. Just because you're a therapist and your dog is laying on the floor in the office all day listening to people cry and grieve and be angry does not mean that your dog isn't getting stressed. You've got to be super aware of the effect of the people's emotions on your dog. Comet worked in New York City after 9/11, and he was working with grieving family members with two top psychologists in New York City. And he did not show signs of stress. He was very happy to do what he did. He loved people. He was there with strangers, not even with me. And he just did a fabulous job. But it was so remarkable because most dogs can't cope with people's emotions all day long, day after day, and be okay. But I had taught these people how to do T-touches with him. They were well aware of his need to go out and roll. Their office was right on Central Park. He got outside. He had good organic food to help keep him grounded. I mean, we did everything we could to support him, and he did amazing work. He really helped a lot of people. Did they document it as animal-assisted therapy? I doubt it. But, he was doing animal-assisted therapy for people and did tremendous benefits for them. And certainly when I was working at a nursing home, and that story about Comet and the veteran is on my website and on my Facebook page, and I believe we have it on our YouTube channel now too. That story is an example of what animal-assisted therapy can provide for people. That veteran who had been diagnosed with psychological issues and in institutions his entire life, on the last couple of days of his deathbed, really, he confided in Comet a lot of stresses in his life that he had kept to himself. And yes, I was providing physical therapy for him while he was talking to Comet, and I didn't document Comet as doing animal-assisted therapy, but clearly there were tremendous benefits for that veteran in that session. I can't read this. Something about dogs are so sensitive to our feelings. I love to watch a therapy dog doing his job. Yeah, that's the truth. They are a good dog working with people, doing therapy is a brilliant thing. And that connection that these dogs make with people that are in raw emotional states or physical needs can be really profound. And one person I know around here who does a lot of work with kids with sensory integration problems. Oh, Tristan, your fuzz buns are moving the camera today. Sometimes she brings a dog to work and just lets the dog walk around in this area she has filled with balls and things for the kids. And the dog is just another thing in the room. And again, she doesn't document that it's animal-assisted therapy, but the dog is kind of happy, middle-aged, doesn't really go over and interact with the kids, but the dog's presence really helps the kids. So, and she doesn't bring the dog every day. It would be so stressful for the dog to be there every day. And we'll certainly talk more about how to take care of your dog if he is a therapy dog, and also how to figure out whether your dog can be a good therapy dog. Some dogs are just not cut out to be therapy dogs, and that's the way it is. And just because they seem friendly and like people doesn't mean they can work in this very stressful environment for them. And they will tolerate a lot of things and put up with things for their people and because they're trying to do a good job. But it doesn't mean that they're having a good time and that you're in a safe and good situation with your dog and the people where you're working. So that's a little bit about animal-assisted therapy. And that, again, is a a type of therapy, some kind of therapy, physical therapy, occupational therapy, recreational therapy, nursing care, and emotional therapy that is being provided by a person licensed in that field, and the dog is part of the therapy process, or the horse or the cat. I've even seen people use rabbits and guinea pigs in their psychotherapy practices, again, just to bring that sense of calm to the office. And we will be back again tomorrow, where we'll talk more about therapy dogs and what they are. But I think first we'll talk about how to know if your dog might be a good therapy dog, or maybe we'll do that on Sunday. But it certainly isn't straightforward. So thanks for joining us today for this episode of Conversations with a Corgi. I have to race out of here to a doctor's appointment. Are you going to come with me? You might. And it's supposed to be a little bit warmer here today. It's pretty exciting. It's going to be 50. I have a lot of work to do today, that's for sure, out in the yard to get things ready for the snow. We've been apparently 15 degrees above normal here through much of the fall, which is really a delight to people like me who grew up further south. So thanks for joining us today. And if you are a professional in any of those fields I mentioned, you might consider animal-assisted therapy. And you can find certainly a bit about it on the internet, but not that much. But in some of the professional journals, the PT and the OT journals, I've seen articles about things that you can do with animal-assisted therapy and therapy sessions. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you tomorrow. Everybody have a great day. Did you see the reindeers outside? Are there any there? They're all hiding. It's hunting season. Thanks for joining us. Oh, I have to remember, when we're talking about therapy dogs, they've now allowed therapy dogs 2 days a week in the airport locally. So I've definitely got to talk about that. It's an interesting thing because airports are stressful. All right, thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you soon.